Are Ancient Salamanders any good in patch 5.1? It's a good thing I specify because this is another unit that's gone through a few versions. It's important to cover this unit now because the Lizardmen roster is one of the more varied rosters and has a lot of potential synergy, and anti-synergy. Certain army concepts will succeed or fail depending on the state of a unit that's supposed to interact with other parts thereof. So let's fire this video up! We're good for 1050 gold and 288 upkeep, and the cost has been tweaked before. On Ultra Scale, you get a large beast with 6,168 health, which would be utterly unforgivable for a melee-only single entity. Armor comes at 95, which is on the lighter side but still very respectable. Missile resistance is the same 15 as with other dinos in this size class. Leadership comes at 65, which is okay. Speed 75, which is quite nimble. Charge speed 100. These are important figures. Melee attack begins at 32, and this is perhaps our final unit source of flaming attack in the faction. Attack interval is 3.6, so less downtime between animations. Splash target size is actually large, so trolls and below and max splash targets damage is only 4, which means this unit is not optimized for melee with infantry whatsoever, but it'll tend to kill rather than love tap. Melee defense starts at 29, which isn't bad. Weapon strength comes at 365, split between 115 base and 250 armor piercing, so despite being a missile monster, it has bite. Remember, this damage is modified by fire resistance or fire weakness. Charge bonus is 30 and mass is 2000, a far cry from a lot of the dinosaurs we've covered, but that's okay. For ranged, ammunition comes at 25 fireballs. Missile damage is given as 378 and is both flaming attack and inflicts the Flammable debuff for 20 seconds, creating a 20% weakness to fire, a direct damage boost to all flaming attacks. You know, like this one. We're coming back to this later. Direct impact damage is split between 70 base and 265 armor piercing. That is, the actual projectile smashing in is armor piercing for most of its damage. On the other hand, no one's going to write home about this level of damage. Each projectile has a 7-meter detonation radius, so while it's not necessarily being fired at a mortar trajectory, it has a large impact, but of course that's a single fireball. Within that radius, it can do base 85 damage and armor piercing 32. So while there are hard limits on how much it can hit, you're hitting a decent amount. Reload time is 12, so exactly the same as regular salamanders, and total accuracy is given as the normal 20. Calibration distance of 120 isn't terrible. Calibration area 2.3 is actually fairly accurate, and there is a small penetration size, max target span of 2 after the first, at which point we're going to get the explosion regardless. It's not reliable, but it's there. This is a siege attacker and causes fear and terror and its primal instincts. Siege Attacker is about bashing gates. The fireballs cannot target walls or towers, and if you're using the flat trajectory, it's hard to hit targets on the walls. If you can somehow bait out the mortar trajectory, that's a lot better. In the redline skills, this too is a beast driver unit, so at 3 pips plus 6 melee defense, plus 12% weapon strength, and plus 8% missile strength. Epicentrist grants the usual plus 10 armor, plus 5 leadership, and plus 12 flat charge bonus at rank 7. In the tech tree, all we really get is recruit rank and upkeep reduction, not like those things are unimportant, but they'll only snowball with late-game cities and provinces. So how do we use the Ancient Salamander? Well, we're close to wrapping up the core units, so I won't dwell. While it has use as an emergency reinforcement in melee, and does hit pretty hard overall, its best use is as one part of a Fire Slan army, because that Fire Slan is going to be using spells with Kindle Flame attached, producing its own temporary 20% weakness to fire. So 20% weakness to fire on top of Flammable, which gives its own 20% weakness to fire. On top of any fire weakness, a unit like Dryads or Tree can have normally, and you have a huge damage swing in your favor. Sadly, they do have that physical resistance. Or you use Flaming Sword of Ruin and just laugh as the world burns. That's the best use. Short of a Fire Slan, it's still usable, but you're really not expected to use it absent other sources of fire. What are those sources? For 2 Throws of Glory, Chameleon Stalkers. For extended air support, Pterodon Riders with Fire Leech Bolas, and Salamander Hunting Pads. Of course, other Ancient Salamanders are available, but yeah, what I've seen is that if you have 2 side by side in a control group, they're firing at the same patch of ground in an enemy unit, and that's very wasteful. So realistically, you don't want to bring an Ancient Salamander unless you're using Salamander Hunting Packs as well, but as they're generally good units and 20% extra damage is a big deal, why not? I've used these as reinforcements for a primeval gory army to provide a little range, and it wasn't terrible. Still, the range damage here is enough to aggrieve, it is not enough to destroy on its own. It needs the combo. at least on ultra unit size. But that's okay. Combinations are not difficult to find. On their own, they're okay, but they are combat support. Though one thing I established in this video is that flanking with them, and they are indeed fast enough to flank, can greatly increase your performance in support of the battle line. So if you can do it, do it. They can take a few hits even though they're far from Dread Saurians. Take care, and have fun setting, if not the world, then a lot of your enemies on fire. That's a good runner-up.